Hello, good afternoon. Uh, we continue on the saga of life and what it brings to each and every one of us. We all need guides, we all need teachers, we all need examples. And at different times in our lives, at least in my life, different teachings resonated with me. In my earliest years, it was Paramahamsa Yogananda, Self-Realization Fellowship. From the time I was about 17, found his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, on my mother's bookshelf. Great, great read. Well, he had more mystical experiences, more out-of-the-body experiences than I personally have yet to have, and it makes fascinating reading. But this was not the essence of his teacher. It's really not mysticism. He was born and raised in mystical India and came as a 30-something-year-old monk to live in America. In contrast to his India, he came to secular America. And he was a very wise man. And he couched or framed his teaching in a context that included Jesus, the Bible, his stories that resonated and were familiar with his audience, the Americans, Western audience. Spent the last of his years in America. Great place in Malibu, California. I've been there to his ashram on a beautiful lake. A lake that can be easily walked around in 45 minutes. Different little sanctuaries, his own personal meditation room, and a great gift store. I got meaningful gifts that I've shared from his gift shop. So thanks, Paramahamsa. Thanks, Self-Realization Fellowship. So this was a teaching that was with me for many years. And then came a time that Zazen from Japan, Suzuki, Christmas Humphreys, other writers, not necessarily teachers as such, that I accepted as a teacher. Paramahamsa, up and all through this point, was inclusive. He was the only one that resonated with a master disciple kind of paradigm. But Suzuki, Alan Watts, and others, and just my exposure, my reading, my studies of the Zen tradition had an element of that paradox of simplicity, complexity within the simple. lies. Complexity. And it was in the search of examining, breaking down, weighing, sitting on complexity in search of the simplicity. And somewhere in here I got a little bit misdirected with my 30-year obsession, I guess is the best word, with quieting, taming the mind, hoping to get a glimpse of clarity. Clarity was what I sought. And clarity for me, up until really recently, the 5 or 6 years, was a very elusive state. And much sought after, striving, effort put into, first of all, trying to solve my personal koan given me by a Roshi in Hawaii, who for a brief period of time was my first teacher that I could share physical proximity with. And I delved into the Zen tradition of mastering, attempting to master, beginning on the long road to masterhood of ikebana, flower arrangement, cha dao, the tea ceremony, and martial arts. Taida, in the samurai, the true way of the warrior, the samurai tradition. And martial arts, basically what was provided by the dojo in Kalihi Valley on the island of Oahu in Honolulu, Hawaii, was kendo and kyushu, kyudo. Kyudo? Yeah, Kyushu is an island, isn't it? Kyudo, archery. And I felt like probably since I was kind of a broad horizon that I needed to practice narrowing, and archery seemed like the perfect choice. But however, in the tradition, this choice was not mine. The Roshi chose, and I can still remember he'd point to in the dojo where we wore white gis, and a white belt, no rank of accomplishment as in the other martial arts. And he pointed to a line right down the center of the dojo, and he said, "You walk." So I spent the next year and a half attempting to master the simplicity of a Zen walk, one foot in front of the other. And the Roshi explained to me, after my frustration of spending 6 months and everybody else was doing something and I was still walking, only me, by the way. And he was trying to share with me that this walking is the foundation of all martial arts. This balance, this getting in harmony with the environment. So much a part of your surroundings that it almost as if you disappear. He taught me about the rhythm of your surroundings and learning to be in that rhythm, become part of that rhythm, indistinguishable from the rhythm itself. That you could walk through a crowd, the crowd would magically get out of the way. And at the same time, never really fully cognizant of your presence. Pretty heady stuff. And I'd like to report to you that I became a master of this walk, but sadly to say is that I really didn't show much improvement. I've always had a certain disconnect with my body, and the disconnect is mental, overthinking, thinking too much, never just being in the body. So as a consequence, I wasn't good at dancing, martial arts, so sports that I became good in is anything to do with water, because I think the overwhelmingness of water would help me with overthinking. Water and baseball, of all things. I was a third baseman and I loved baseball. There's something about the anticipation of baseball that's not in any other sport that I'm aware of. As the pitcher begins to his wind-up and pitches the ball, as it's going to the batter, as it reaches the batter, anything could happen. And the beauty was that most times nothing happened, or very little happened. But it was this anticipation, this ritual that you were prepared, such as the third baseman, the hot corner. You were prepared each and every time that the pitcher threw the ball, that you would need to act quickly or react quickly. Fast reflexes. And then there'd be the immediate kind of let down. It was kind of like a breathe in, breathe out. And just as the ball approached the batter, there was almost a holding of the breath. The world seemed to stand still. And this was, for me, just amazing. And it was pretty good. And then that's on defense. And then the offensive side, hitting the ball. Pretty good feeling. And again, enjoyed a modicum of success in baseball. We played some pickup basketball, neighborhood playground pickup basketball, and I could shoot and I could play some. But in most arenas of my life, my thinking process dominated. So here I am at the dojo for some time, eventually to go to Japan and spend a couple years in a more formal Renzai Zen setting, living as a monk amongst the monks. And during this time, I still had my Roshi in Hawaii, my teacher in Hawaii, was the closest I came to having a teacher in the flesh. In Japan, I was kind of beyond the pale. It was a curiosity that was easily dismissed. I could blend in, but I found no individual that was teaching me, while at the same time, everyone there was an example for me. So it's my only experience in my life in a really strictly regimented, hierarchical, consciously hierarchical system that I was a willing participant in. Never had the military duty, military responsibility. Never was an agent of war. I was naturally always inclined to be an agent of peace. And this inclination kept me from having to participate in as an agent of war. Which to this day I consider a great blessing, because I was always a round peg, and to try to hammer me in to the square hole would have been disastrous. In the recent years, in more recent times, Thich Nhat Hanh, as near as I can get to pronounce it. I've heard so many different, and probably none of them correct, because I've never had the opportunity to hear a native Vietnamese pronounce this man's name. And as I address you, he's just a gentle soul. He looks like the Buddha of my imagination. Gautama, the Buddha, the historical Buddha. Anyway, I was watching YouTube and listening to him talk to Oprah Winfrey on her Soul Sunday mornings or something. Very great show. And he said many things that resonated. Everything that came out of his mouth was a gift and a treasure. And as I'm speaking to you now, he's back in Vietnam after 30, 40, 50 years in exile in France. Interesting, Dalai Lama, another great spiritual being that we've lived with for many years, was exiled from Tibet to Dharamsala, India, for more than 50 years, I think. But Thich, or Nhat, or Hanh, is back in his native Vietnam, being cared for and loved by the monks. He's in his 90s, and his health is not good, and each day it's a possibility that he chooses to leave the body, but he's still with us, and I feel his presence very much. But he said something to Oprah that just immediately I had to write it down, and I knew that this was going to be my next episode, my next teaching, my next title. I put a lot of effort, or no effort at all, whichever way you want to look at it, into naming, and they're always given to me, either as through watching something, consciously awake, physically awake, or else come to me in dreams. memorable dreams, conscious dreaming, conscious dreaming while sleeping, as compared to, or as contrasted to, conscious dreaming while awake. And what he said is, out of the ashes of suffering rises a phoenix. And that just, wow. Even reading the title, reciting the title, reciting these words to you, puts me in an instantaneous meditative state. Because one of this suffering issue, the common misunderstanding that Buddha said all life is suffering, and what this means, they took it as a Western pundits, people seeking to understand, took this idea of suffering as a really negative perspective. But all you have to do is sit with it a bit, and really, if you live long enough and you're reflective, introspective enough, you can see that suffering seems to be a theme. If it's not personal experience, don't worry, it won't be long before it will be. It's part of, a big part of life. But he said, all life is suffering. Now, the way that I took this message was that he was talking about life as a secular, life as a separate, divisive being. And the suffering came from the longing to know the ethereal, that the permanence within, as we say many times, to learn sorrow is caused by our inability to remember what we've forgotten, to remember what we always known. This is the root of suffering. Everything else that we call surfing, surfing, where's my mind? I'm in the water again, surfing. Me and my surfboard here on my left. Suffering is suffering of Maya. Suffering from Maya is illusion. Suffering from the ravages, the limitations, the separation, the division, the jealousy, the hate, the non-forgiveness, the lack of surrender of the egoic state. Now, ego-centered beings center this, will ever see everything with the lens of this ego and see suffering in this sense: loss of family, loss of friends, fear of death. Fear in and of itself is a source of apparent suffering. But I chose to look at suffering in deeper sense, because truly what made me suffer is being able to see glimpses, taste, to express the divine, to discover the divine within, And what was the obstacles? What did I need to strive and do harder and be a better person, and of course conquer the mind, silence the mind, so that clarity would come? Well, life is full of ironies, if nothing else. Living life, for sure. It was only upon giving up the striving, admitting that 30 years of rigorous discipline, training had resulted in the clarity that I so desired. In the roots of desire, see? Even if you desire good things, or things that you see as fundamentally worthwhile, it's still, the key is in the desire. And it starts with the recognition of the necessity to surrender. As the Korean monk I saw years ago in Hawaii said, "Who is I, me, my?" Only to let us know, to share, that the only answer to this puzzle, this koan, if you will, who is I, me, my? Don't know. Don't know. Not I don't know. No I. Don't know. To relegate these things to where they belong. The realms of the unknowable. And it's unknowable simply because we don't have the tools, we don't have the patience, we don't have the ability, we don't have the capacity to deal with the enormity, the overwhelming immenseness of what's so, of what's is, of what I, me, my truly is. So when you come up to, I had some kind of confidence that there wasn't a problem that I put in my mind, I chewed in my cud, I sat on, I contemplated, I pondered, I ruminated, that I couldn't come up with an answer. And here, the answer was that I wasn't capable of, I didn't have the tools necessary, capacity. My hard drive, my brain was just too small to contain to entertain even what's so. And this results, did for me, in a state of humbleness and giving up, mindful giving up, and begins with surrender. Surrender and forgiveness, beginning with forgiving yourself. And that's where the seeds are planted for true forgiveness of everything and everyone. So this surrender is a profound surrender. This surrender was the first thing that brought me truly to my knees. I bowed down in the face of the awesomeness of surrender. And this bowing down was the ashes that Thich Nhat Hanh was alluding to. And this surrender was this rewarded with the rise of a phoenix. The letting go of fear. And this process, the result of which was equanimity. This is truly mindfulness, being in the moment. Equanimity, accepting whatever comes in the same calm, contained state of mind, state of being. And it came from surrender, from giving up, leading to surrender, forgiveness, letting go of judgment. I tell you, it made clarity pale in significance. But it wasn't long that I began to see that the true path for me to clarity was surrender, forgiveness, embracing equanimity. And then things became very clear. Very different than where I was searching. And the irony here doesn't escape me because I was blessed with equanimity, which is a far greater value to me than being clear. Because clear does not necessarily lead to surety, crystal clear, sureness. Clarity is seeing.